Hey, so welcome to the third installment of Nature's Bounty. Today we're going to do the big four. I'm going to talk about the four primary plants and trees that we need to survive in the wild. So, number one, everybody's got one of these, a lawn with grass. Got grass. Grass is so nutritious, it's amazing. And as it grows up and gets older, it gets fibrous and stuff. It's hard to digest, but you know what? When it's really young, you pull them young plants out, or you pull the roots out of the ground and you can boil and eat the roots. Otherwise, if you can't digest the grass when it's older and bigger, and what you do, you boil it and make a tea out of it. And it's so full of minerals and vitamins, it's amazing. You could actually, you take grass, a little bit of grass, chew it up, and when you're done chewing it up, spit it out. Because you can actually digest this, or there's so much cellulose and stuff in the grass that it's almost worthless as a carbohydrate. But the vitamins and minerals you get out of it, outstanding. You spit it out and you're good to go. At least you got your vitamins for the day.
Doesn't matter what kind of grass?
Here is another aspect of grass that is, this is just a flower head, but at some point that turns into seeds, and seeds, grass seeds have tons of protein, vitamin A, vitamin C. It's fabulous. You could literally survive on grass alone. And if you don't care for the taste of grass, you could pick a few. This time in summer in June, you have daisies, oxeye daisies, Grandma's favorite plant. Even the petals, pull a couple petals off.
Little Spidey has them.
Really peppery, strong peppery flavor. The best thing to do is pull the leaves off. They're very spicy. You don't want to eat too much of it, because it can also be a laxative. So don't eat too much daisy, but if you throw some of these leaves in some cooking dishes and stuff, you get this really strong peppery flavor. It's fabulous. Here's number two on the big four. Pine trees. We have, in northern Wisconsin, we have white pine, red pine, spruce, cedar, all sorts of different things. White pine and any pine, it has the same characteristics no matter what. You can take these pine needles, pull them out, and basically you can make tea out of them. Incidentally, when Columbus and the boats came over from Europe for the first time ever, and actually I believe it was the Vikings first, they were suffering from a terrible disease called scurvy, which is a lack of vitamin C in their diet. Because the only thing they had was barrels of salt pork, and that's about it. And it took months and months and months to get from Europe to America. So when first settlers came here suffering from scurvy, they were, what do we do? They didn't even know what the problem was. Native Americans were here, they're like, oh, we know exactly what it is. Here, we'll make you some tea out of white pine or hemlock. They boil it up. And actually, white pine makes a gorgeous sapphire colored tea. It's absolutely amazing. And it has more vitamin C in one small handful of needles than 3 oranges. And they cured everybody on the boat of scurvy because they knew all the vitamin C. And what happens is when you live indigenously in an area, you have a certain respect and a certain knowledge of the land that you live in. So over the winter months, you only have like protein and meats to eat all winter, maybe a few vegetables that you saved. But they knew in the spring when people started getting scurvy that they had to go out and harvest pine needles and make a tea out of it, and you get your vitamin C, vitamin A, and yum. It's actually a beautiful thing. On top of it, because it's one of the big four, you can also crush and mash the needles, crush it down, and it produces this little bit of moisture, and that moisture is a strong cleanser. You can also boil and scoop off the oil on the top of the boil, so if you boil a whole pile of white pine needles, you get this almost oily texture on top of the water. Scoop that out, keep it in a small container, and it makes an amazing cleanser. And it's also antibiotic, it's astringent, so it's good for cuts and sores and things like that. So, and the other thing about pine trees is if you're really in a pinch, you can eat almost the inner bark of almost any pine tree, red pine, white pine, spruce, fir trees, hands down fabulous. And in the early spring, when they're putting on their new growth, the little red buds that show up on the ends of the branches on pine trees and fir trees are full of protein. They're fabulous to eat. So in the big four, we've talked about grasses, which are full of nutrients and not very digestible, but if you make a tea out of them, they're really good and they can sustain you for many, many, many days. We talked about pine trees, which can also sustain you for many, many days, full of vitamin C and minerals, and on top of it you can eat the inner bark if you're very desperate. Number three, and actually this is probably should be number one, are cattails. This is literally a grocery store full of things that you can use. You can see the old seed heads from last year. So the first thing that I'm going to show you here with cattails the old dried stalks from last year. You twist them off, break them off, and you have two things here out of it. You have fabulous tinder for starting a fire. Also, you have insulation. This is the old seed heads. These are the puffy, soft seeds. You can make beds, pillows. You can use it for insulation to keep warm in the winter, because you can find these in the wintertime, all these dead cattail heads sticking above the ice. And on top of it, you have a stalk that makes a fabulous fire starter. So you can bring it down and you can use it as a fire starter. You know, twist it until it makes a coal, and the coal comes out of the shaft, not the wood underneath. You can make a coal out of this by making a bow drill or twisting it back and forth with a partner, where you can, one person twists it, the next person takes over, twist, 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 and you can make a coal out of that, fire. So the next thing, medicinal. Cattails are extraordinarily medicinal. So if you bring the camera really close, we're going to show you nature's medicine. Can you see that? All of this almost like gel that is astringent, antibiotic. It's also a painkiller. As a matter of fact, a very prominent survivalist, naturalist guy named by the name, can I name him? By the name of Tom Brown. He used this on his gums before he had a tooth extracted, and he didn't need the Novocaine, nothing. So here you have medicine cabinet right here. See that? If you get a cut, shallow cut, or a deep cut where you sewed it up and then you can put that on there, it's amazing. The other great thing about cattails, if you grab them down by the base and lift them out, what you have is this, all these big tall leaves full of cells and cellulose. You peel them off, and look what we have inside. A beautiful, edible bit of food. Oh, look at that. It's like it's like palm shoots, or when you eat it raw, it tastes like cucumber. If you boil this up and cook it, it tastes like buttered corn. It's absolutely amazing. You can survive, literally survive, anywhere in the United States where cattails grow on almost cattails alone. This is so full of vitamins and minerals and protein. It's amazing. And it's so good. It's just like absolutely tasty. You can also use these fabulous flat leaves. You can use them to weave baskets or braids or whatever you want to do with them. You know, you can braid these things. You know, if you had a flat surface, you could do it a little bit better, but I'm just doing it. You can actually make waterproof baskets out of these things. Look at how tight they stay when you braid them. You can catch water in them, and water stays in them. It's amazing. Another thing about cattails. If you dig down at the base of them, you have crazy root systems, like all over the place. It's just crazy. All of these small white rootlets, you boil them up. You can eat them raw as they are, and they taste like cucumber. You can boil them. They are full of protein. And here's the major rootstock that runs around and produces more cattails, because they basically expand by or take over areas by root. You can peel this and see it's nice and white inside. You can mash that up in water until the water is cloudy. Then you boil the water off and you end up with a flour that you can use for baking bread, things like that. This is why I say cattails are basically a grocery store and a pharmacy. Hands down, it is the premier edible plant in the United States, without question. So the last thing I'm going to say about cattails, right here, Here is a mature cattail with its flower stalk. It's hard as a rock, it seems like. So you pull that apart, peel it down, and the trick is to get this while it's still in its sheath, like this. You know, it comes up in leaves in the center, and what you end up in the middle you have two different things. You have the male and female flower ready to go. And so the first thing to pop, actually I was wrong, the male flower is the top. So the first thing that happens is this poofs out and makes pollen. This yellow pollen. And you can actually shake that pollen out of there when it grows up and use it as a mix with flour made from, for instance, the inner bark of pine trees, or you can also make flour, the inner bark of popple trees, anything like that. Or if you had your own flour, you can add this to it, make things like pancakes, things. But at this stage, when it's so young and tender and beautiful, it's like it's fabulous. Yum. You go down to the female part. Eat it raw. It's just fabulous. If you boil these, there again, it's just like the bottoms of the stalks. It tastes like buttered corn when you boil them. It is absolutely fabulous. This is literally, if you look close at a cattail that's of mature age, here's the sheath. You can see it right here. Here's the sheath with the male and female flowers inside of it. And you just break it off and take it with you. And it just makes a beautiful dinner. And the amount of protein that cattails have compared to other plants, the only plant that I know of, garden plant, that you could compare it to is probably kale. Kale has tons of vitamin A, vitamin C, and protein. You don't have that mostly in the wild. I don't actually have a knife, so it's really hard to like pull this apart. So you just shred it as much as possible. Twist it and pull. And then you've got your dinner. And you can go through the whole cattail bunch. There's another one. There's another one. There's another one. And on top of it, and we can pull up the shoots. So we have cattail shoots and heads to have for dinner tonight. Yum. Beautiful. So, been talking about cattails for quite a bit. You know, you get the medicine from the inside. You've got all these awesome leaves for making baskets and things like that. And later I'm going to do a spoon and show you how to make a spoon from scratch, so that you can scoop up soup, or if you're making soup or stew. The other thing, these, when you pull up a cattail, roots and all, from the bottom of a river or lake or pond, they have these spines that almost look like spines sticking out. But they're actually an awesome vegetable. Just pull it off. It's just a new cattail coming out of the base of it. And you can actually, if you look really close, it's even better if you put some sand on it, because you can actually see the lines of this growing thing. Comes up, wraps around. They're the leaves making the new cattails. This is like the best part of the cattail. You eat that, it's amazing. I'm not going to eat it now, it's full of sand, but it is very, very good.